Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so we are also going to have a new screen for the lecture screen, so be patient, everyone. We will have that. I've sent in the designs. We are getting it developed. If it needs to be improved, I will improve it until we get it right. But for now, we're just going to have this basic screen, my camera, and that's that. You know, the goals and everything, I want to have events lists and all that stuff, but it comes with the design. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be patient. We will have our new stuff coming very soon. So, keep your pants on. Please, keep your fucking pants on. Okay, so, let's talk a bit about attachment theory. Attachment theory has to do with the first couple of years of your life to the rest of your life, right? So, let me first explain what psychoanalysis is. So, psychoanalysis is the evaluation of a person's life based on the first 6 years of their life, right? Habits, behaviors, cognition, attachment, what we say, what we're interested in, our desires, versus what we feel we need to do versus what we have to do type of stuff. Angel, devil, that's psychoanalysis. Everything, unconscious to preconscious to conscious has to do with the first 6 years of your life. So that's kind of psychoanalysis in a nutshell. So John Bolby is like he is the godfather. He is the grandpapa of attachment theory. And then Mary Ainsworth kind of built off of his work in 1970s, and she did her own study. But John Bolby, after the war, after World War II, John Bolby was able to have his own organization, to be able to lead in his research, and he was able, and what he was really interested in was attachment, and how the mother and infant relationship is built. Now, again, at the time, if we're talking contemporary psychology, we talk about roles in family, right? Talk about how, the old school version of what a wife is supposed to do and what a man's supposed to do, pretty much, right? Now, today we believe in equality. We believe that everybody can do what they please to do. Like, whatever role they want to assume, that's what they can assume. Because as long as it works, as long as there's a healthy relationship between the child and yourself, or consider myself the parent, and growth and personal development as well, right? As long as there's boundaries, or healthy boundaries, as long as what we call it a secure attachment, right? As long as everything, all the cogs and the nuts and bolts, as everything's working together, there's no problem, right? But if the relationships are disrupted, then that's where John Bolby would come in, and you would analyze that relationship. So when you hear the mother's voice, when the father's around, then you have this easy transition between dynamics and roles and whatnot in the family, so the baby can understand, okay, well, both parents are around, I can go to both parents if I need them. But we have to also understand that a baby, an infant, is helpless to a certain degree. So that infant needs a parent for instruction or for help in any regards, take care of themselves, to get food, right? It was said by behavioral theorists that attachment is a learned response. Like, this is something that you learn over a course of time. However, Bolby believed as a psychoanalytic, or stemming from psychoanalytic. He is considered one of the fathers also to developmental psychology, right? Attachment is stemmed from the relationship between the mother and the infant. If there is a disruption in the relationship, then there's going to be later issues in life. And that's kind of how John Bolby wanted to open up this topic, right? This is just kind of like their ideologies, that as the child gets older, that infant selects a specific parent because that parent is around. Now, classical thinking within contemporary psychology is that the mother would be the first person, obviously, to care for the child, which is true. Nowadays, again, we were talking about parenting styles, and we were talking about the uninvolved, right? Nowadays, we see more single parents than ever, right? And that's very stressful. That's very harmful on the mother without any respite care. So when we talk about an actual healthy relationship, building a secure attachment, as well as, you know, having that, what we call it, authoritative type of relationship, then you're going to see something a little bit more healthy, right? Most of these theories are based on like nuclear families, right? Nowadays we see families with like 100 kids and like 2 parents, 1 parent. I don't know how single parents can take hold of like a dozen or less, or like 9, 8, 7, 6. Like, imagine having that many kids. John Bolby coming in, creating kind of like this template of, okay, well, there's an innate fact of attachment. This relationship between, sure, the parent and the infant, if it's disrupted, then that creates anxiety for the child. And that level of anxiety will dictate kind of this relationship going forward, right? So Mary Ainsworth came in the 1970s, and again, like a lot of Bolby's work is like 1950s, 1930s all the way to the 1950s. So, you know, again, pre and post-war type of research. Again, he's working with all the framework in the world because, you know, code of ethics and boundaries and all those things within professional and ethical research hasn't been created until, like, sure, the 1950s and going forward. So now that the ethics are starting to be more established in the 1970s, Mary Ainsworth created the principles of the attachment theory. So the first, you have the secure attachment. If, say, the parents left, right, and left the kid alone with a stranger, how would the child, respond, right? So a healthy child would, be comfortable given the permission of the parents to leave, right? They would greet their parents and they would, not necessarily you're always going to be comfortable with strangers around you as a kid, but you're gonna be more welcoming if parent is comfortable around them and acknowledges that this is somebody to be relaxed around. You can trust her and stuff. Then child is going to be more willing to be alone with that person, that stranger, right? A lot of it has to do with observational conditioning, and your parents and your siblings are the first people that you learn that from. That you learn from mistakes, trial and error, right? All that stuff, that's from your immediate family, right? So then we have the ambivalent attachment where, parents leave and the kid is just absolutely balling out, just hating it. Teacher's like, okay, well, I guess we have to deal with this. So ambivalent attachment just feels this absolutely separated from who they're left with. They are completely separated from their parents, and this is like they're it just doesn't feel right, right? Avoidant is kind of like, once the parents leave, then you feel like you need to hide. Like you feel like, not even like the fact that he's hiding, but the fact that you need to hide yourself within. You freeze up. You just kind of want to separate yourself, and you want to be alone. Like, that's how you're dealing with it. It's fear. It's that anxiety that turns things into fear. Have you noticed that there are really a few responses for how to manage your sympathetic nervous system? So anxiety and stress, how you manage that. Remember what we talked about? Talked about the fight, flight, and freeze, right? The freeze part would be the avoidant attachment. The crying, I mean, you could consider that just kind of a freeze mentality. But some other kids, again, are also, yes, they cry, but they also have a tantrum, which is a mixture of different behaviors where, they could get handsy real quick, man. You can get real handsy, bro. There's your fight response. And then the freeze, again, can mix in with the flight, right? Flight, you're pretty much running away, but you can also, that could be a freeze response, right? Disorder attachment is like, I don't care who I'm around. And that has to do a lot with the parents not really tending to the... So when the child is an infant, and the infant is crying and needing attention, that lack of responsivity by the parents will create this unorganized, disordered type of relationship, and so the kid doesn't know where to really find that help, or doesn't really care who it's from. Some parents are like cool with that, right? Some parents are completely like, again, the kid does what he does, right? He builds his own or her own independence, and the parents are like, okay, well, I guess we'll come in and out. And usually, sometimes when you have a parent that's traveling a lot, that's doing stuff for more for financial purposes, you see this a lot because they're trying to make money and trying to do this without that responsivity. In those early years, the child doesn't really, he's kind of forced, or she's kind of forced to figure this out on their own. So that's kind of like the 4 attachment patterns that we see that this study kind of portrayed. And that's why Mary Ainsworth was kind of put right next to John Bolby, because the specificity of this research is very kind of cool, man. I mean, it's very simple too. Let's be honest. A lot of these studies are simple, but you can learn so much from the interaction of parents and kids, between kids and strangers, between the parents and strangers, between, like, I'm telling you, there's a lot that goes into what goes on within. Our learning patterns and theories all come from the family. So attachment is just another part of that understanding of what attachment is. So here we go. Here are some of kind of like the characteristics. Yeah, so the proximity, how far away are the parents? Can they see them? Can the kids see the parents and all that stuff? Safe haven, return. Okay, so secure base, like certain environments that also allow the child to feel comfortable. Again, that's what we really... What does that sound like when we have a secure base? A space for you. That kind of sounds like home. Not gonna lie. When you make a home from your environment, when you make it secure for yourself, you find yourself um, responding positively to, you know, what's around you. When you find something that makes you feel secure in some capacity, right? That anxiety kind of diminishes. You have something that you can, you know, share with you and yourself. This is what we call positive imagery in reflection to how this responds towards, you know, external stimuli. So when it comes to strangers and stuff, you know, having people in your home, at least you're in home, right? When you're at school, you know, at least there might be people around your home, your neighbors, right, that you might trust. And separation distress, there's your last one. So again, there's a lot into the anxiety of attachment that reflects on behavioral patterns, right? And that's really what attachment is. It's really observing how the anxiety of children and that anxiety relating to attachment, and really just how the response out of it. You're actually loving the content? Awesome, man. And this is what we want to talk about. You know, we don't want to go on for hours. I love talking about psychology, guys. Going on for hours and talking about one topic, that's not really my thing. I don't like lecturing and doing all this stuff. But when it has to do with everybody's lives, right? Attachment theory, we all have a story behind, you know, where our attachment comes from, who's a part of this equation, right? Like what family members were there, what family members weren't there, siblings, all that stuff. How this all kind of interminges and turns into how we treat other people. And, you know, social anxieties, anxiety disorders, all that stuff, depression even is also genetic. There is a lot that goes into how our family reflects on how we behave, right? And that's why it's so important to be around them. Even in times that you need a person, this is why family is so important. Following up with your question, the insecure relationship is feeling like a child cannot seek out help and that they are pretty much alone and isolated and separated from where they can actually find a solution, right? The child cannot seek help from the parent because the parent, all they know how to do is, if they're confused or they're stressed or have anxiety over something that the child does or says, then there's going to be a punishment that's involved in some capacity. Now, you could have some leniency with those parents, man. They could understand that line between too much punishment and a healthy amount of punishment, but that's usually never the case. You know, high responsivity has now taken the reins of what works in parenting styles. So in regards to creating an insecure attachment, the child may not want to seek out help from a parent that abuses them. And that's typically the case. Authoritative, being more open to what approach we have with individual solutions for children, like maybe allowing yourself to listen before you respond might be the best way to go. And well, respond in the way of consequence, right? But if we respond by listening and by just taking the time to kind of understand the child's autonomy at this very moment, then maybe perhaps we can solve a problem together. But if we're asserting power and control, that's not going to help. You're not helping the situation. You're not helping the child to learn. The only thing that the child is learning is that if I want the more extreme version of a solution, then I can go to this parent. But if I need comfort and warmth and an open ear, you got to understand that how we make attachments is based on how we need people to help us. And that's why it's so important to be humble and courteous to others. Girls that get involved with the porn industry, right? They become numb. They don't have any guidance, and the only thing they know is what they're doing. And once they're in it, it's really hard to get out of it, right? It's the same thing. There's no guidance. There's no modeling, mimesis, which is like mimicking. If there's none of that, then how do we learn what to do and what to say in individual situations? How do we develop the way that society views as a healthy way of development? How can we do that if we don't create good relationships? So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with. But I urge y'all to think about the relationships you have. Think about the relationships you have, ladies and gentlemen, because you might be surprised how similar and different you are from people in your family, and why that might be the case. What happened to you when you were growing up that made the relationships the way they are? Relationship with your parents, with your siblings, with your close friends, with relatives, anybody. Those relationships guide you to your own autonomy. And I urge you guys to think about that.